Big D.
If you're struggling with addiction to alcohol, drugs, doesn't matter. Hit me up so I can help you get into rehab, detox, treatment, something like that. Your life matters, man. Out there on the streets, it's not worth trying to do this by yourself. It's not even possible to do this by yourself. I've never seen it possibly be done. Also, my wife has a YouTube channel. Make sure you subscribe, and a Facebook page. So do I. Go visit the Facebook page. More's coming out. The wife's going to be bringing some
trauma to the table.
But this is real life stuff. And we've got an interesting interview here. Stay tuned. Watch this. Very interesting. Love y'all. Hey guys, welcome back. Big D, Derek Lambert. Thanks for joining me on the channel. You guys have someone special I want to introduce you to. Jake Evans. What's up, Jake?
Not much, man. How are you? Thank you for having me.
Absolutely, bro. So I wanted to delve into something about you, because you've actually contacted me, and it's very unique, your approach on addiction and what you've gone through. So tell them a little bit about you.
So when it comes to like addiction specifically, I would say that a lot of things for me as an individual, I didn't necessarily really know that I was struggling with it when I was, because I identified a lot of it as just being normal, right? So when I was growing up, roughly 14, 15, I was playing in and out of bands, playing with people that were 21, 22, part of that scene. And when you are part of that music scene, you're seeing a lot of stuff going on. So I was being exposed to alcohol, being exposed to weed, and always in the back of my mind, since I was a young kid, always feeling like I didn't necessarily connect with people that were my own age, didn't feel like I connected with people that were in my grade. Always felt like I was different somehow. And when I was playing music, it gave me an outlet, but I still didn't feel part of that community. And so the first time that I smoked weed, or the first time that I drank alcohol with these people, it was like instantaneous community. And so I identified hanging out with people, just being connected with people, with partaking in substance. And it's interesting because if you do a history lesson, right, and you look back in time, it's like that is what most of community is about. Celebrating the kill by everybody going around and drinking alcohol, passing the peace pipe, Native Americans celebrating something over a communal resource. And it's like, when you think about it, that is how people typically tended to connect history lesson wise. But our society is just different now. And so as I got older, it was stuff like ecstasy, cocaine, LSD, shrooms. And the list goes on and on and on. And what's interesting that I just recently started thinking about is I think that my first actual real addiction was to cough medicine. So I mean, yeah, I was smoking weed almost daily. Yeah, I was drinking alcohol on the weekends, but cough medicine was the very first thing that I ever was I stole for it. I did things that I wouldn't typically do for it. And I just started thinking through that thing. I was like, am I actually a true opiate addict? Yes. But was that my first addiction? And it's no, I think actually it was cough medicine.
So you have opiate addiction. Obviously, your multiple substances become, addictive to you, and you took a different path. Okay, so before we get to that path that I think needs to be discussed on what you've researched, what give us a little history of your addiction, and what makes you unique from what you've told me is that what I would call you would be a high functioning addict. You've done some things wrong, but go into some details about your experience.
Yeah, so throughout high school, so this has just been a recent epiphany of mine. I have coming up on 5 years sober. So for me, when I think about my addiction, it's I always said that I never really started hard substances until I was 18, 19 years old. But again, this cough medicine thing was in the background. And so, and I don't think it's normal to show up to school high on cough medicine, but that's what I was doing. And so I was in high school, varsity football player, jazz band, show choir, ACE team, which is an academic excellence team. And I was smoking weed, drinking, and doing cough medicine here and there. And so for me, I was always looking to try to feel connected to people. And I found it through achievement. I was like, if I'm a part of something, then I'm a part of something. And I hope that makes sense. But to me, it did in that mind frame. And so I wanted to be a part of everything that I could. And so I was pre-accepted into dental school at age 18. My dad's a dentist. I was being groomed to take over the family business. And on an acid trip, had an epiphany that if I kept doing the same thing I was doing, I was going to wind up being my dad, just version 2.0. and I didn't want that. So dropped out of school, pursued recording engineering, got my certification in that, and then wound up thinking to myself, this isn't really what I want to do. I want to go back to school, and I can write music, I can record music, I can perform music, but I can't represent myself if I ever need to. So that's where the law school idea came from. And I was like, I got to do anything I can in order to get into law school. And so again, for me, always wanted to feel a part of something. I got involved in student government in college. I got involved in National Model United Nations. So I was student body vice president in my second year of law school, a 10 times over highly decorated National Model United Nations delegate. And on one of those trips, I was introduced to Percocet for the very first time. And so in the background, before that, I was using cocaine, I was drinking, I was doing things. But to me, it was normal, it was recreational. This is what college students are doing. Adderall, things along those lines. It didn't register in my head as like, this is a problem. To me, it was, I'm in college. And when I found Percocet, this individual, he was 18 or 19, and he pulls out these little blue pills. I was like, hey man, you want to try these? And I was like, and I know what pain pills are. I was like, no, dude, I don't snort anything that isn't cocaine. And so like, I'm like some sort of pedestal drug addict. And he was like, no, you can smoke these. And for whatever reason, it was like Scooby-Doo. It was like my head turned. I was like, what? I was like, you can smoke those? And he goes, yeah. He's like, and I was like, show me how you do it. And so he showed me how you smoke pills. And I was like, okay. So I tried it. And the minute that I tried it, that wanting to connect, that like longing to feel like I didn't belong, that anxiety that I always felt. I mean, I'm sure people can pick up on it now. My brain works a million miles a minute. It's always going. And for the first time ever, it was like, I could relax and finally just feel at peace. And I was like, this is nice. And I felt like it made me a better performer. I felt like it made me better overall. And for a brief while, it actually did. Mm-hmm. And for some people, it slows them down and they'll nod out and stuff. But for somebody who has a really overactive brain, it slowed me down to the point where I was I was on other people's level. And it's not to say that like I'm up here and people are down here. It's just to say that like I know that my brain works like super fast. Doesn't mean that everything that comes out of my mouth is good. It just means that like my brain just like cognitively functions very, very fast. And so for me, opiates finally slowed me down at a pace where I felt like I was on the same level as other people. And then it took more and more and more to get me to that point over time. And so after about a year and a half, I was in my second year in law school. I was performing super, super, super high still, but I couldn't sit through a class without getting high because I didn't feel normal. It's like I couldn't, like at that point when you're afraid, definitely afraid of being sick, definitely afraid that people are going to find out that you're using the way that you're using. It's going to ruin whatever idea of whatever image it is that you've created for yourself. There's no room for not being level. And so I had to feel as though I was level all the time. And that was a really expensive habit. It was a really time consuming habit. And I was always afraid of going to heroin because I didn't know what was in it. But I felt like I knew what was in pills. Of course, now we know, 5 years later, that's not necessarily the case as what it was back then. But I felt like that was the case.
So what was the breaking point? What happened that changed you?
I can remember after the fourth day of using these things, people say that it doesn't happen. Like, I think that there's a huge misconception for people out there that like people who suffer from substance abuse or addiction, that like we choose to feel the way that we feel and that like we choose that gnarly physical addiction. For me, I know that wasn't the case for me. Like, yes, I chose the first drug. Yes, I chose the first hit. Yes, I chose to continue using it for a brief period in time. But I thought I was going to be done with it after that trip. That trip was 4 days. And so I used it periodically throughout that trip, throughout the day. And what wound up happening was that I was coming back on a bus, and like I'm used to doing these National Model United Nations trips. They're like 16-hour work days. Then you go out afterwards and like you're hanging out with people from like Europe, South Korea, China. It's like everybody's coming together, huge melting pot of people, just like networking, talking to people. It's really fun, but it's really tiring. And so when I was coming back on this bus, I was like, I'm used to feeling run down. I'm used to feeling tired after these things, but something's different. It's like, I don't feel right. And as I'm getting off the bus, the kid who introduced me to him, he was like, hey man, if you ever need any more of those, and now looking back on it, I know what he was doing. He's like, if you ever need any more of those, all you have to do is call me. And so like, I'm thinking, yeah, right, dude, I'm never gonna touch those things ever again. And like, I'm leaving. And the crazy thing about me is that like, I had times in my life, LSD, I was like, I'm not gonna touch that anymore. I had an amazing trip, knew I was just gonna be chasing that same high. I was like, there's no point in ever trying to do this ever again because nothing's ever gonna compare to that. I shouldn't touch this anymore. Never did. Had one really bad roll. I was like, I'm not going to do this ever again. Never did. And it's like, for me, I was able to make those sort of decisions with things. I'm like, I'm never going to drink and drive. Never drink and drive. I was able to create those lines for myself. So when I was getting off this bus, I was thinking like, yeah, I'm never going to touch those again. I got home and I told my sister about it, like how I was feeling. I was like, something feels weird. And she had experimented a lot with drugs. And she was like, sounds like you're addicted to opiates. And I was like, what? And she's like, yeah, it sounds like you're going through withdrawal. And I was like, how do you know? She's like, because I've gone through withdrawal. And then this is how I found out that my sister also had an opiate addiction. And that, I was like, well, have you ever smoked these pills? And this is one of the biggest regrets of my addiction. For me, she's my little sister. Like, have you ever smoked those before? She goes, no. I was like, do you have any? And she goes, yeah. I was like, let me show you how to do it. So I showed my sister how to smoke pills. And that started our using together became very synergistic. And that was the one person, the one confidant who knew what was going on with me other than like our dealer. And every time I used was with her. Every time she used was with me, with varying degrees because we're addicts. So like, I'm sure I hid some from her and she hid some from me. But for the most part, it was very synergistic, very sick. And she was the one person I could trust with what was going on with me. I was one person she could trust with what was going on with her. And what really got to me was when I realized how sick I was and then how young she was, because she's 3 years younger than me, and me realizing that like I had failed as a big brother. And, you know, yeah, I was in law school, I had done all these things, but my sister didn't have the same, I think she's smarter than me, but she doesn't have the same drive that I have. And so for, at least at that time, she didn't. And so she had failed out of school. She had tried to get into a trade school, failed out of that. And I saw what it was doing to her. And I realized that the only way that she was going to get clean was if I got clean. And I was afraid to ruin my reputation. I was afraid to ruin my image. And so I tried to do it on my own a handful of times. I know that you were able to do that. I know that it's gnarly.
Honestly, though, everything lined up, and there were moments where I wanted to give in.
Yeah.
So it's not like I can't tell you how many people. And I really regret that people are taking that and trying to do this on their couch. There have been a few people that said they're successful from it, but like I would so recommend going to a medical facility.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah, like my wife's brother was able to get off of heroin cold turkey. I think it takes a very special kind of person, a very special kind of drive, a very intrinsic motivation. And some people are at that place and some people just aren't. And it's like for me in particular, with my particular issue, because I had school, because I had all these other things that were going on, I couldn't afford to have 3-4 days where I'm like not on point. And so I thought it was 3 days and then you're good. Like all you got to do is just get through that sickness, and then you know you're eventually just feel like 100% better. And that's not the case. So I would always get to 3 days, and I would feel worse than what I felt on day one. Like day one would be like sniffles, a little bit of the runs and stuff like that. Day two would be like, okay, now I have body aches, my bones are kind of sore, and I can't really sleep. Day three would be like, okay, I'm sleeping during the day, I'm not really sleeping at night, but like I'm, you know, my bones are kind of hurting again. But then that mental obsession really kicks in on day three, and it's like all this would go away if I just use. And then I tried it 3 or 4 different times, and I remember this Key and Peele episode about the guy who's sitting inside of this closet talking about this crazy drug and like how it'll he's like, you know, then your eyeballs will bleed and then all this stuff will happen. And he's talking about like this high and then all the after effects that happen from it. And I'm looking over at my sisters, we're both kicking on the couch, and I'm like, this is what we're in right now. Like they're like, yeah, this is a joke, but this is what we are currently in. And that was the mental shift. And I remember praying to God, I was like, I can't do this on my own, but I'm afraid to ask for help. And I was like, so if you give me something, I'll take it. It was 4 months later, But 4 months later, I had this teacher. I was in a class called cyber law. My mom's a presidential appointee. She specializes in cybersecurity. I thought that's what it was about, like finding cyber criminals and like prosecuting them. But it's actually about online copyright law. And I was going to drop it, but I was getting high, so I missed the deadline to drop the class. So I was in it just by accident. And never talked to that teacher, was performing really high in that class, would answer questions, would go, of course, show up late. I would get high during class. And she leaves a sticky note on my desk one day and was like, I need to talk to you after class. And so I've never spoken to her before, aside from like interactions, raising my hand, answering questions. So I gave her a thumbs up, and after class, I walked up to her. She pulls out this sheet of paper and puts it on her podium. She's like, I've been tracking you. I want to show you something. And so she goes, tardy, 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 one time. Tardy, 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 tardy. And like keeps going down this list. And she's like, you've only been on time twice this entire school year. And she's like, and I've even given you a lot of leniency. If you're tardy one more time, you can't take this final. And she's like, and that's ridiculous because of how intelligent I know you are. She's like, you're going to fail this class because you can't show up on time. And she's like, what is going on with you? Is everything okay? And I don't know if it's the way that she asked me or if it's like, I felt like something telling me that there are two distinct roads I could go right now. And you and I were talking a little bit before this. Our dads are pretty similar. My dad's a pull yourself up by your bootstraps, like get this thing done. Like if you want to stop, just stop. He put himself through dental school. I was like, I can pull myself up right now. I can get through this and I can continue through this and I can start my career and I can make this happen. Or I can take literally what I asked for and like tell somebody what's going on with me and I can start this journey. And so I told her. And that was the first time I let anybody else in who I didn't use with know what was happening with me. And I was terrified. I thought I was going to be judged. I thought I was going to be like ostracized. I thought that, I didn't know what was going to happen to me. And instead of all that stuff, what happened was that I could see it in her face. She wanted to help me. And so after I was done, it's like I felt like a huge relief. It's like finally like the charade. I don't have to carry it on anymore. One other person knows. And I was like, so what do I do now? And she's like, well, now we got to go tell the dean so that we can figure out what did happen. And so I went with her to go tell the dean and I told it again. And then now my schooling stuff was put on hold. Like everything that I had going on was put on hold. I was able to maintain things. So everything was good. I was like, so what do I do now? And they're like, well, now you got to tell your parents. And I was like, oh man. I was like, how am I supposed to do that? And then I was like, on their eyes, I'm like performing up here. They have no clue what's really going on with me. And they're like, trust me. Like all any parent wants is for your kid to be happy and healthy, and you're none of those things. So that's when I made the decision that I wanted to get sober. I wasn't ready to get sober, but I started my pathway to sobriety right there. That was where the willingness to try came in. I don't think I gave up my will, so to speak, for a couple months after that, but that was whenever I was ready to try to start making this thing happen for myself.
How did you get clean?
After a couple failed attempts, again, because I think that for some people that work, I think for some people when you are a little bit more cerebral, you have a tendency to intellectualize things, and then that can work to your detriment whenever you're trying to get sober. It's hard, but it's not overcomplicated. And I overcomplicated like the hell out of getting sober. So when I walked into my first 30-day treatment center, the very first thing that I did was I looked around the room and I was like, that guy's died and came back to life 6 times. That person's been to jail 13 times. This person hits his wife. I'm none of those things. I was getting high in the bathroom at school. Like, yeah, that's pretty bad, but that's the worst thing I did. And for me, I was justifying the fact that I was nothing like anybody else. So therefore, maybe my pathway to recovery is going to look different than everybody else's. And I remember sitting in a very similar situation to this, sitting across from an LMFT, and he's telling me that I can never use drugs or drink or any of this other stuff ever again. And I remember asking him, I was like, well, do you drink? And he goes, yeah. I was like, well, then how the hell are you supposed to tell me how to not drink if you've never done it yourself? And then I was like, that doesn't make any sense to me. And then he's like, Jake, you might be too smart for your own good. He's like, I'm trying to help you out here. And I was like, well, you might be trying to help me. I was like, but like, it's like getting advice from somebody who has no idea what they're talking about. I was like, so I was like, as much as when I want to respect you, it's like, it's really hard for me to. I had more respect for the techs that had like 2 years sober or 6 months sober. Those were the people that I connected with more so than like the therapists and all these other people. Because I felt like they were just reading stuff from a book. And I also believed I was a lot smarter than what they were. So that was harder too. And I believed like, you have this idea of what addiction looks like. It looks nothing like that. And like, I'm sitting here trying to tell you what my addiction looks like so you can help me out. And you're still hitting me with like textbook, DBT, CBT, all this stuff. And like, that's not what I need. I need like somebody who hears what I'm saying. So I used after I got out because I didn't change anything. I thought I knew better than everybody. And so after about 60 days, my intake quadrupled because guilt and shame, like people think I'm doing well, but I'm not. So like now the guilt and shame is also fueling my already addicted mindset. So my intake quadrupled. And what wound up happening is that I made a foxhole prayer again. And I was like, anything you put in my way, I don't care what it is, I'm going to take it this time. Like, just help me. And anything that you do for me, I don't care if you tell me I have to stand on one foot, hop up and down, pat my head with one hand and rub my stomach for an hour. I'm going to do it for 2 because that's how serious I am about getting sober. But show me what to do. And so I wasn't ready to take action. And so my parents wound up finding out about what was going on. I was posed with homelessness or getting help again. I did not want to be homeless in West Virginia in January. So I thought about it. I like went towards the door. I had a pocket full of my pills. I was like, I'll be fine for a little while. So I thought about it, and then I stopped at the door. Wasn't ready to give up the pills, but I stopped at the door, and I was like, okay, I'll get the help. And so I wound up on a plane 2 hours later, right back in the same exact 30-day treatment center, sitting across from the same exact LMFT. And I looked at him and I was like, dude, I'm sorry. I was like, I came in here like a cocky shit, and I need help. And I don't care what you tell me to do, I'm going to do it. And then he told me, I'm going to need you to look into a long-term treatment center because you're the kind of addict who needs long-term reprogramming. Because if you just allow yourself to get out of this and then go right back to what you were doing, you're going to fall right back into it. And I was like, okay. Like, I didn't argue. I was like, whatever you suggest. And so he and my mom worked together to find something that they thought would work for me. It was a program called Treehouse Recovery. It's in Costa Mesa, California. And they don't focus on medication. What they focus on is taking Harvest of the Brain's natural pharmacy. And what that means is that like things like serotonin, things like dopamine, things like GABA, these things are naturally produced within the brain. And a lot of times what we try to do is that when we're going through post-acute withdrawal symptoms, we want to try to have those things fixed immediately. Well, that's the addicts in us. That's the substance abusers in us. These things take time. And so what Treehouse says is that they expedite the process. So imagine it like the easiest way to make this thing relevant is like the best thing for your brain to do is to actually go through instances where it's going to be feeling these negative emotions and then you learning how to work through them in real time while having these neurochemicals being produced within your brain. So we do something that's called action-based induction therapy. And what that means is we're literally going to antagonize your limbic system, feel things like anger, fear, anxiety in real time, so that then you have to cognitively work through that. And we're doing this through means it's like action-based induction therapy is kind of similar to Navy SEALs BUDS training. So we take our guys down into the ocean. It was designed by a former U.S. Navy SEAL. We take our guys into the ocean. They're paddling on this huge boat, trying to traverse through waves. You're going to feel anger because you're going to be mad if you get wrecked. You're going to feel fear because sometimes the ocean's way more powerful than you are as an individual. You're going to feel anxiety because like you're going out into this ocean. And so you're going to experience all these things in real time, but you're moving. You're getting your body moving. So you're producing these neurochemicals and then you're working towards a common goal. So you're putting your prefrontal cortex, what's responsible for logic, reasoning, rationality, that's working at the same time. And all these things are coming together to help heal your brain and create new positive neural pathways. And what we found through doing this for about 8 years now is that like, one, our guys come out a lot more emotionally responsible is the way that I would call it. They have a lot more threshold for difficult emotions. So I can just talk about my own experience. I found out while I was in treatment, my grandfather was diagnosed with cancer. My grandfather was like my dad to me. My dad is my dad, but my grandfather was like my father. He taught me everything I know about being a man. And so my dad was really good too, but I spent a lot of time with my grandfather. And so I found out he was sick. Normally, for me, that's an excuse to use. I found out that I was going to be the best man at my best friend's wedding while I was in treatment, which meant I was going to be surrounded by alcohol, having to do all these things. Like, that would have been an excuse to use. And what happened is that through going through this process, I was like, I've already experienced all these emotions before. I have wins built up for like whatever duration of time your treatment is. I have wins that I've built up over this course of time. I know how to handle these situations, and I have that confidence to be able to do it. And so I personally am a firm believer that like medication has its role. It's definitely the beginning stage. For me, that's what I needed. It's definitely the beginning stage, but it's not a long-term solution for people. And sometimes it is, right? Like if you're somebody who definitely struggles with mental wellness, you have genetic predispositions for that, then by all means. But you're not going to know if you're somebody that struggles with substance abuse or addiction until you get at least 6 to 9 months separated from any chemical. So you need that, your brain needs that time to heal. And I was fortunate enough that I found a place that allowed my brain to heal, because I was working with a disease mindset, thought I was smarter than everybody else. And so I was convincing myself that I knew what was best for me, and I needed that break. So then I could see that like, these guys know what they're talking about. I'm feeling better. I am doing better.
Wow. Yeah, that's amazing. I can totally relate. And a lot of that stuff, I can tell you that it's interesting. I didn't go to the treatment, but I felt like a lot of that stuff was true from when I got clean. However, I wish, that anyone who's watching would take that path of really going to treatment, because I don't know how to put it, man. The universe literally lined up for me, bro. Yeah,
well, I feel the same way for me too, and I feel like that's how it works for anybody whenever they get clean, right? It's like I feel like the same thing has to happen for you in order to get sick, right? It's like the perfect storm has to come about in order for you to feel, because we all create lines for ourselves, right? I remember being like 10, 11 years old and being like, oh yeah, I'm never going to do cocaine. Like I remember like the DARE project or whatever that would come through school, and they're sitting there showing lungs. I'm like, oh yeah, I'm never going to do that. And I remember being like in like third grade, and they had this thing called like there was this Flintstones, like Baby Flintstones. Remember that cartoon?
Yep.
So there was this Baby Flintstones cartoon, and they Wilma was running this race, and she got addicted to cigarettes, and she called them her energy sticks. It's just like, I need energy sticks. And I remember being like, oh man, that's so bad. I was like, I'm never going to smoke energy sticks.
Never energy sticks. Yeah.
And like, I remember being so young thinking these things, but then sure enough, right, it didn't take long. As soon as I was exposed to them, I was like, I would cross one little line. It's like, oh, I want to feel accepted by these people. So I'll smoke weed with them, cross the line. Oh, I want to feel accepted by these people. I'll go to their party, and then like there's alcohol there, so I'll drink that. I want to feel accepted by these people, and I want to get more creative, so I'll cross a boundary there. And I get really good at crossing these boundaries. Then it's like tragedy strikes in my way. I already know that these are the things that make me feel comfortable about myself. So like I lost my uncle, who was one of my best friends. And that's really that's one of the biggest things that happened to me that led to me feeling like more and more like I don't want to feel like this. So I was drinking more and more and more as that was going on. And then this guy came out with these pills, and like it was, it's like the perfect storm, and like I feel better now.
Do you go to meetings or stuff like that today? What do you do to stay clean? And it doesn't. I mean, I'm not like you have to go to meetings.
No. I know, and so it's.
I just want to know.
I think everybody has their own thing for what's going to get them clean. I think everybody has their own thing for what's going to get them clean. I think everybody has their own thing for what's going to help them stay clean. And so for me, what I do is that I know that the disease of addiction is biology, psychology, sociology. Like that's the only thing that's recognized on how to treat it. So that by means, like you have to think that's the only thing that's going to keep it in remission. If we treat it like an addiction or like a disease that it should be treated like. So I have to do things that are going to address my biology, my psychology, and my sociology. So for biology, I make sure that I'm physically active, like not as much as what I want to be because I'm a new dad.
Right. So it's like I get the dad.
Yeah. So I'm trying to find a way to like reintegrate that back into my system and back into my structure. So I ran a marathon about 7-8 months ago, right before she was born, and so I'm like I'm used to being super physically active, and then you have a kid and you're like, oh man. So I'm working that back into my thing, but just being aware of it and doing it is important for me in my sobriety.
Right.
Psychology, it's like I have to make sure that I'm addressing my mental state and I'm aware of it in multiple ways. So like for me, it's reading, it's journaling, it's doing things that worked for me in the beginning.
Sociology.
So mine's morphed over time. And so mine's church, mine's family. And for me, what the 12 steps were was that they were breadcrumbs to me having a relationship with God. I felt like that's what the 12 steps were. That's not for everybody. That's just how my mind related to it. Is that it was leading me on this pathway to eventually accept Christ into my life. So that's my story. But other people, they need something different, and mine's morphed over time. So initially, I needed meetings. Like I didn't know anyone, and it's instantaneous community. And especially if you do go to a treatment center in order to get help at first, you may not wind up staying in the same city that you wind up getting help in. And so having that community is important. Mm-hmm. So I would say that like, even if you're just looking for people who are like-minded, for people who have similar struggles, meetings are important. For me, they were in the beginning. And then it was friends from the meeting, and then they have other friends.
Right.
And then so it was working itself out into there. And then it was bringing my friends that weren't necessarily sober, but were good for me. Then it was bringing them into my life and figuring out a way that I could create boundaries for them. And then eventually, for me, I didn't have any like relationships with the opposite sex, or my relationships of choice for whoever is listening, until I was at least a year, because I knew I wasn't ready for it. And it's like there's gonna be a lot of not everybody's gonna be in that situation. So you need firm boundaries in the beginning. But like for me, I need to really focus on myself and figure out like, how do I fit within this world now? Because my biggest thing was that I wanted to feel accepted. So if I got accepted by somebody who wasn't healthy for me, then that could have been a recipe for disaster.
You had to learn to know who you were and love yourself before you could try to do that for others.
Oh yeah,
that's
dangerous.
Awesome. Well, Jake, if someone's struggling out there right now, give them a word of encouragement, brother.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, to the camera?
Sure.
Okay. So yeah, I mean, I guess what I would say is that for me, it was a journey of self-acceptance. And it's hard to get to that point, but when you realize that that's really what you're looking for, it's doable. And it's more than doable, it's more than attainable. There's people out there who want to help you do it. And so you're never in this thing alone. The one thing that I will tell you that I've learned from anyone who's been in recovery, and I've helped hundreds of people through this thing, I've never met one person who's ever done it alone, ever. And so if you have somebody in your life that's reaching out to you that you can trust, that you feel like that you can trust, or if you're looking for someone to trust, reach out and ask for the help, because that one conversation is what saved my life, that one talk. And so it starts with one, and then it just snowballs after that.
Ladies and gentlemen, Big D, Derek Lambert, Jake Evans.
Thank you, brother.
Nice to meet you.
Yeah, thank you, man.
Make sure you check out the description of the video. You guys can see all the ways to contact and get a hold of him and find out all the resources pertaining to Jake. And we'll be hearing more from you, brother.
Thank you, man. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
All right.